And welcome back. As mentioned before the break, we are joined by statisticians from the Statistical Institute of Belize to talk to us a little bit about the 2016 figures. Joining us for our second conversation is Ms. Jacqueline Sabal, Mr. Jefte Ocheata, and Ms. Tiffany Vasquez. Good morning. Thank you for being here.
So, to kick things off, prior to coming on live, I was asking about the challenges of discussing figures when things look dismal and gloomy.
Like
when we
the
look
weather.
at 2016, we always look at the economic situation that plagued us over the past 12 months.
Yeah.
How do we contextualize this conversation, seeing as though some of us believe and some of us are going through the effects of rather shaky economic times?
Yeah, well, as I said before we started, you would have to look at the reasons, right? For example, what I've seen for 2016, apart from us exporting less quantities, we have also been impacted by low fuel prices, lower prices for sugar on the European market, and in the banana industry. Even though we had the exit of that one farm, we also had bad weather conditions, right? Which also led to the decrease in banana. So you have to look at it on an individual point rather than on a whole.
But what I want to do before we really jump into the meat of the conversation, I noticed that you are different types of statisticians. So we have statistician 1 in the middle and then statistician 2. So tell us a little bit about your roles at SIB and how it relates to how the figures are determined. So let's start with you.
Well, I am the senior statistician in the Economic Statistics Unit.
Okay.
I basically, I really work analyzing the economy.
Okay.
And I also help them, guiding them to understand any other things, phenomena in their specific subject areas that they work on, like inflation and merchandise trade.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Jacqueline?
Like Jefte just said, I deal with price statistics, so that means the consumer price index, and that measures inflation. So that's what I do.
And I deal solely with trade data, so I look closely at the import and export data.
So let's talk a bit about the figures for the CPI 2016.
Okay, well, what is exactly the CPI? It's the consumer price index, and that's what we use to measure inflation. It takes into account 260, a basket of 260 goods and services that households mainly use or spend money on.
Okay.
For example, we collect prices on rice, fuel, butane, rent, etc.
Okay.
Each month, over 8,000 prices are used to calculate the CPI. Prices may go up, some may go down, but most of them normally remain unchanged. But if the consumer price index increases, that mainly means that on average prices are going up, and if it decreases, then on average prices are going down. Inflation now, that looks at prices, the change in prices of goods and services over a period of time. So our latest statistics that we released to wrap up 2016 shows that for the year 2016, we had an inflation rate of 0.7%. And that is in comparison to 2015.
Okay.
So, for example, let's say a household's expenses totaled $100 in 2015. That simply means that in 2016, it would be $100.70 for those exact items.
And goods.
Yeah.
Okay.
For December alone, our inflation was at 1.1%.
Okay.
And that was mainly because of our transport index. We all know that transport is going up. We have seen that gradual increase in the transport index throughout the year. That's because fuel prices are going up. Recently, I heard on the news butane price is going up, and then the increase in bus fare that also affected the transport index. So we saw that gradual increase, but it was mainly due to transport.
And it's good that you brought that up, because I was going to ask you, what are some of the areas that contribute mainly to inflation?
Like I said, the main categories, we have the housing, electricity, gas, and other fuels category.
Okay.
That takes up like 26%
Okay.
of our basket of goods, so it has a very large weight.
Good
So
weight, yeah.
changes in like rent, gas, electricity, that would affect the inflation rate greatly. Also, transport takes up 14%, and food prices affect 20%. So those main categories, go ahead. Those main categories are what, if you see even little spikes in those, can really affect the inflation rate.
And in terms of the measuring stick of the entire country, how is it weighted against each community, and how do you even gather that information to the point that it's accurate and it's relevant to comparing the previous figures?
We have our staff that goes out and collect prices from these establishments. We collect prices from urban areas in Belize, except for Benque Viejo and San Pedro. So we have our staff that goes out every month. We collect these prices. We try to build a good relationship with most of the establishments that we get prices from, because we need to go there every month. So it's good that if we have a relationship with them, they're very willing and open to us to go in and collect the prices. So every month we get those prices. We do checks to ensure that the prices are correct, that they are right, that they're accurate. So that's how we do checks on that.
So
with respect to that question that you were mentioning, how we take the municipal prices into a global level in the country, we developed a weighting scheme based on our household expenditure survey of 2008, which we identified about 5,000 households in the country. And so based on the spending throughout the country, we saw, this area is spending more than the other one, and that's how we build the weights, and that's how we apply the weights to the products that are in the basket to produce the national level of the index, because we also are able to produce individual level indexes for each municipality, which we also mentioned briefly when we discuss our findings of the inflation for the month.
When you look at the imports and exports, and you look at the figures over the past 12 months, you mentioned earlier that there are certain factors that come to play that forces things to be the way they are. Can you elaborate a little bit more on those figures and what specifically jumps out at you?
All right, sure. Well, it's good to note that for 2016, both imports and exports fell, right? When we collect our data, import data, it is categorized according to similarities and their destinations. So when we look at imports, we have noticed that export processing zones fell significantly by $17 million, which is a 61% drop from that of 2015. And we have noticed that what drove that was reduced imports of shrimp feed. And that is what I'm saying. So it is all connected. So we have noticed as shrimp production decreased, so did the demand for shrimp feed. Then you could also look at the mineral fuels and lubricants category. That category fell by approximately $37 million. Now, are we importing less? No. Well, majorly, no. We have seen a minor reduction in imported quantities of diesel and regular, yet we have spent a lot less. We have imported more premium, but we have spent less. So that is telling you that world prices for fuel has been very low, right? And then we have also looked at chemical products. Chemical products, importation of chemical products fell, and that was driven by reduced imports of fertilizers. Importation of manufactured goods also fell, and importation of goods destined for the commercial free zones fell by approximately $11 million due to decreased imports of handbags, cigarettes, and clothing. But even though you had that overall decrease, you also had major increases over the year. Only that these increases were not sufficient to offset all of those major decreases. We have increase in the machinery and transport equipment, which is Belize's largest import category, that rose by approximately $29 million. From the beginning of the year, we have seen heightened imports of telecommunication parts. We also had increase in the other manufacturers category, where you had increased importation of prefabricated buildings. Now, if you look at the export side of it now, this is where it gets very interesting, right? Exports for the year 2016 totaled $401.1 million. This is a drop of 25.1% or 134.7 million when you compare that to 2015. The marine category had significant losses. It fell by over 50% or exactly 52.4%. If you look within the marine category, the major contributor is shrimp. Shrimp fell by itself by approximately 79%. Hence that drove the marine category down. If you look at crude exports, yes, we had reduced quantities of crude exports, but the fact is crude declined by 38%, and a major contributor to that was prices on the world market. They were very low in comparison to that of 2015. Then if you look at banana, as I said earlier, banana, yes, we had an exit of one farm which led to the decrease, but we also had bad weather conditions throughout the year. And then you could look at sugar. Now sugar is very interesting. Sugar, if you compare 2015 and 2016, basically we shipped identical quantities, a minor reduction. Yet sugar fell by 23.3%, and that is telling you that prices on the European market were low, at least lower than it was in 2015. And this is what I spoke about with different contributing factors. Because had prices been the same, then sugar would not have been affected as much. So you have to look at a global impact. And then even to drive that home, you could look at orange concentrate. Citrus exports, there were marked reductions in orange concentrate export quantities, yet citrus emerged with only a 1.5% reduction in earnings. So that is telling you that on the market, citrus did well. Orange concentrate did well. Prices were favorable on the market. So Belize's exports and imports, if you look at it, yes, we had our part in it, but the global impact had a major part in it as well.
Can you talk to us a little bit about how that information is important for, I guess, the Ministry of Trade and Commerce? Because as it relates to the way we export and import, they're all defined by EPAs or trade agreements. So talk to us a little bit about that dynamic and how they use the information.
Yeah, well,
basically what they do is because the trade agreements are with different countries, they would look at the importation or exportation that we have of the products that we are importing from a country. And if it's favorable for Belize, then we would do an agreement on specific products. Because the agreement is for you to allow importation of products from that country and for you to supply products to that country. So we have agreements with Mexico, El Salvador, and Guatemala right now that we're working. But most of the things, like, you know, trade is more beneficial to the partner country, not to Belize, because we cannot compete at the same level with them. They will supply to us everything, most of the manufactured products.
So that speaks a lot about our economy and the pockets that need to be filled, the gaps in terms of manufacturing and the development of new sectors.
As you were hearing Tiffany's explanation, everything correlates because you had decreases in imports for shrimp feed. You had decreases in imports of fertilizers. All of that tells you, like, the primary sector is being affected right now. That's the agriculture and the fishing industries. They're not performing well in the economy, not just for the export market, but for the local market. They're not producing enough. We're producing less than what we were producing before. And that's just one of the main industries that's hurting right now the entire economy. Then you have to think also about, like, the petroleum industry. That's affecting a lot the entire economy. So those three industries, when you just think about them, they are a big portion of the entire economy, and it affects us a lot.
I think one of the things that for most motorists and people who use fuels for various purposes, that while you mentioned the fuel prices being fairly low on the world market, locally, because of either the taxes being applied to the fuel, consumers aren't really feeling they're not feeling
Exactly,
they're not getting the benefit of reduced cost of fuel.
And that's why in the transportation index of the CPI, we've seen an increase in fuel prices because of the same taxes that have been applied by the government. Because obviously we need revenue.
Yeah. Can you speak to us a little bit more about how this information, of course it's used for government purpose mainly because they're the ones with the analysts and all those people to determine how we move forward in agreements, whether it be regional or global. But for the average person, how important is it for them to consider this information as it relates to their spending, or maybe the way that they want to invest in our country, or even, you know, open a business?
Well, for an investor, you have to look at the inflation, you have to look at the GDP, and you have to look at the inflows and the outflows of trade.
Okay.
And so by looking at the production itself in the country and the prices, you can determine whether it's going to be for you beneficial to open, let's say, I don't know, a factory, or start an operation in services in the country.
Yeah.
Maybe that person can identify from the information of the GDP that there is something missing. We're importing a lot of telecommunication parts, but somebody is not offering the services.
Yeah.
So by looking at that, they can correlate and make decisions. Now, for the average person, obviously, we look at the spending patterns. We're reporting that inflation is increasing in transportation, inflation is increasing in food. So the person can always use this information to budget. Now, the truth and the reality is that almost nobody really uses the information to budget because things are going up.
Yeah.
And the thing is that the average person would say, well, I do not see the information that they're saying being reflected in the supermarket. The thing is, like Jackie mentioned, we have a basket of products that was taken from a survey in 2008. That is not the reflection of what's happening right now.
Okay.
That's our base. But that means that we need to do another study to rebase our basket of goods.
Update. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what I was going to ask, because when you look at 2008 to 2016, that's 8 years, 2017 makes 9 years. So you're essentially basing your report or your forecast on information that is arguably outdated. If you're saying that there needs to be another survey to be able to update this information, you would need to take into consideration everything that has gone up since 2008,
Yes.
correct?
That's precisely the plan that we have. We're right now finalizing our questionnaire, our documents. We're drafting our documents for the survey. We're proposing to have a household expenditure survey in the fall, I would say fall, in August of 2017, which we will basically sample the population, again, an average of 5,000 households, and we would go to them and ask about the expenditure. And therefore, from this survey, we would rebase our basket of goods and create a new basket of goods. And that will help us have better information of what's happening in the spending patterns of households. Also, that being said, the economy measures have to be rebased. Things have changed since when the economy was based in 2000 to right now, that's 17 years. So we also have to look at this. We are planning right now with the assistance of Stats Canada to fix or to better our estimates of the economy. So we have to look at it again. And everything is in relation with one another, and it will affect also how we measure the trade. We have to look at some other avenues. Probably we're not capturing the information that people from El Chor buy in Benque, or people from Belize go to buy in Chetumal, which is not really recorded in the customs information. So all of that has to be taken into consideration in our program, which will obviously try to better so that we can have better quality in the information that we produce.
Do you find that the averages are highly accurate as it relates to the fact that there are different classes and different types of households that exist? For instance, I don't know, in Belize City, you might have a lower middle class family and they're vegan. and that might not be reflected in the...
Well, the population surveys, when we do the surveys out of the population, it takes the households, everything. So we randomly select the households in the country. So everybody has a chance of being selected. So it speaks about what the households in general are saying. It won't really tell us about a specific household, but in general about the entire population, yes.
The weighting is based on, like Jefte said, the general population. So it's not specific to just one household, but on average what everyone consumes or what every household uses. So it's an average.
So in that, to your question, right? If it would reflect what a vegan spends, well, obviously not, because most of the country it's meat, right? So yeah.
I think one of the things here that we're not really touching on, we have very limited time. One of the things that I would want to discuss, I'm not sure if you guys, well, you represent the SIB, and I know that either on a quarterly or a biannual basis, figures are released based on employment and the workforce. Can you briefly speak on that in context of...
We really are not the subject matters, but what I can say is that the last labor force survey reflected a lower unemployment rate than the previous year. However, within that information said, we were able to determine that the unemployment in certain industries has to do with the actual production of the industry. So for instance, I think we saw a decrease in the primary sector, and obviously one of the main reasons we have right now, well, there is less shrimp production, there was an exit of a banana farm, so all of that was affecting. But at the same time, in parts of the country, you saw an increase in the primary sector. Well, sugar is increasing. There's another sugarcane farm happening in Cayo. So all of that helps us explain and understand the labor force. But the specific subject matters have more information about that one.
Okay, can you also talk to us a little bit about the documents that is produced out of the SIB? I know that there's a CPI, the ETB, the GDP, all of these things that tell us where persons can find the information, and a little bit about the other documents that are produced.
We have our website, that's www.sib.org.bz, and under one of the tabs, it's called Statistics. You would click on that tab, and it will show you the statistics that we produce, which is a GDP, the CPI, the merchandise trade, and the labor force, and other statistics. Once you click on, you choose any of the subcategories, and you will get the information for the most recent release or historical data.
As well.
Also, I wanted to ask also, in the instance where there's a flub or a mishap and the information isn't as accurate or as correct as it needs to be, what are the measures in place to ensure that that can be rectified, and that moving forward, whatever the flub was, the mistake or the gap?
Okay, what we can speak is that most of the information that we produce, it has a methodology. The methodology is sound. So whatever we estimate is the best that can be done for right now.
For that time.
However, that being said, that doesn't mean that our numbers do not change. Our numbers can change because that for some instances, for instance, external trade, some warrants were not reported on time to the customs authority, and that then went up into the system, and we weren't able to capture it. However, when we are getting the information, we would revise the numbers. The same thing for GDP. We would revise the numbers when we get additional information.
And I would like to add to that, flubs are very, very rare. For the reason is that our data is highly scrutinized even before we release that data. For example, for trade, I use customs data. But then that customs data is verified with industry data. So, and then we compare it, and then we would use the industry data. So flubs, very rare. It's highly scrutinized even before it is even released to the public.
It's more just about the updating if they miss something and reporting it to us.
And as it relates to the CPI, we go directly to the stores and collect all our data, and like I said, we do checks. We do random checks at times to ensure that it's being done properly.
Yeah.
So, like Tiffany said, flubs are very rare.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Since we are the Statistical Institute, we have a sound methodology
And accuracy is key.
Yeah,
in
of course.
producing statistics. We're the National Institute, and thus we obviously are trying to do the best, and we're the best right now in Belize for the production of statistics.
Yeah.
I know there are some other researcher companies nationally, but they are not abiding by sound methodology.
You can say it in Spanish. You can say it in Spanish.
Methodologies, right?
Yeah.
Of statistics, because the science is there. We have the science,
Yeah.
and we abide by international standards.
Yeah,
We are
exactly.
confined by international standards. So we have to, approach it in that manner.
Yeah, that's Bible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks for being with us this morning and discussing briefly. I know this can be a conversation that is
I know,
a prolonged
very
one,
extensive.
but thanks for being able to shed some light on what the present economic situation is based on the information that you guys have gathered over the past year.
Yeah.
So with that, we're going to take a commercial break, and when we return, is to discuss everything about medical tourism.
Stay tuned.